Okay, so a new layer, set it to tint. Now I could use the watercolor layer setting, as I'm using watercolor brushes to add tone. The only thing about that is it allows, they describe it, ambient design in the manual, as allowing you to use the best features of watercolor. Now that's true, and it allows, for one thing that concerns me about it is it allows a little bit of white. If you select kind of whitish watercolor, it will show that white. Now for this, for putting in tone, I don't want any white. I want it to be tinting. So I'm using a tint layer rather than a watercolor layer. Now there we go, just putting in another layer, and where it overlaps what I'd laid down before, you can see it doesn't mix with it, just overlays it nicely. And I can start to decide what is going to be properly in shadow and what is going to be in the light. There we go. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll zoom right in. You can see just for this kind of thing I'm staying zoomed out. I'm working in quite broad strokes. I'm not getting too intently into detail. I think there's plenty of detail in that sketch for this stage. I don't need to worry about starting describing individual rocks and so on too much. I can just go easy on that just now. But hey, I'll show you something really funky about art rage. Let's zoom in. Okay, look, you can see all the dirt on that pencil drawing. So if we lay down some colour, that sort of greyish brown, but then something really funky I can do is you can bleed in another colour. Look at that, it just merges in beautifully, and then you can make it paler. Just amazing. I love this software. Art Rage from Ambient Design. Anyone who's already aware of my work and perhaps podcasts that I've worked on knows I go on about this software non-stop. But it's just a beautiful thing when you find a piece of software that does what you really want it to do. Makes you very happy. Okay, I'm zooming out because you see what's happening now. I was talking while I was zoomed in and I started getting into details. So I don't want to do that yet. Using some green in the foreground here. Now here's a balancing act that artists have to consider. I want the foreground to be slightly more saturated, stronger colour. That brings things forward. And as you can see, we've got a big depth in this picture. We're going to have to really work the colour to properly reflect the depth. It's a long way from the gate here, right back to the house here, and then into the trees. So the colour is really going to have to work to make that happen. Now, so I want to use more saturated green in the foreground, a warm green that brings this foreground forward. And I'm going to use cooler colours going back the way. But what you can find if you're not careful, if you just use colours without really thinking it through and you just go, right, green in the foreground, when I'm overlaying my blues on the mid and foreground, look, this is quite a blue, quite a cyan, let's make it more blue. Look, I'm getting quite a saturated greens as well. So this area at the back is moving forward to occupy the same pictorial space as this foreground. That's no good. I don't want that to happen. So I need to make sure I'm not making this too saturated in the background. So bluey greys are the order of the day there, and I'll push that back later as well. There's other techniques I'll use later on that will push that background back a little so we don't end up with a flat painting. It's quite the balancing act. Like I say, you want the flow of the same colours throughout the piece to help move the eye around, but equally you want to keep your spaces having integrity to where they're supposed to be within the picture. I hear family members approaching, so I might spare you, gentle viewer, and stop there. I'm just going to carry on. You've seen the process that I'm doing here, so I don't think you need to watch the whole thing. I'll come back when I've put another couple of passes of watercolour on. So catch you in a minute.